So we went past. So yeah, we did talk about. Actually, we got to a point where I stopped. Where I think we were going to talk about refractory period. That's where I stopped. So I'm going to just step back a little bit so that we can catch, revise what we're talking about. Right. So the whole idea about this set of topics we're talking about is to explain how neurons transmit impulse, how neurons send information. And a classic example will be, if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, it means that obviously as I speak, the sound that comes out of my mouth changes the temperature. There are neurons in your ears that respond to changes in pressure, right? So once the pressure around your ears changes, right, those neurons become activated, right? And then when they respond to the change in pressure, it creates an action potential in the neuron. That action potential carries the signal about my voice, right? The sensation of my voice towards the brain, the spine, the central nervous system, right? So that singular act of activation is called action potential. We also call it a neural impulse, right? And I explained to you that when a neuron is sending an information towards the central nervous system or towards the brain, what type of neuron is it? You can put it in the chat box. What type of neuron sends an impulse towards the brain or towards the central nervous system? Yes, Sylvia.
Afferent neuron
is an afferent neuron or is a sensory neuron. Exactly, that's correct, right? And then in the reverse, if a neuron is sending an impulse from the brain towards an organ, we refer to it as afferent neuron or a motor neuron, right? So it takes a while to explain this to understand, because I'm trying to explain it very slowly so that we understand it. But it's a very quick activity. It takes about 300 to 500 milliseconds, half a second, to carry information from one point of, say, your foot towards your brain. It's really quick, right? And then when that happens, the neuron goes back into a resting potential again, right? So it takes about a second and a half for the neuron to go through a cycle of sending an impulse towards the brain and then coming back to rest, and then sending an impulse towards the brain and then coming back to rest. Just half a second, and it goes through that cycle repeatedly. So the neurons in your ear at this point are going through that cycle for them to be able to transmit signals about my voice towards the brain, right? And when it gets to the brain makes interpretation about what information it is carrying. And I think I am talking to you about the all or none principle, right? Anybody remembers what I spoke about when I mentioned the all or none principle? What did I say about the all or none principle? Anybody remembers? What is the all or none principle? If you don't remember, you can put it in there. If you don't want to say, you can put it in the chat box.
Sir.
Yes, go ahead.
So, please, you said it means the neurons always fire at their full strength, and this ensures that the full intensity of the signal is being carried down the nerve fiber.
Well, not exactly. So the all or none principle, I mean, I think you have the idea, but the all or none principle simply states that neurons Well, Davy Olivia, you have the answer to it. Try.
All or none principle states that a neuron either fires or does not. And then when it fires, it will always produce an impulse of the same strength.
Well, yes, that's a correct definition, but that's not the explanation. But so your definition is correct. So I give it activated so that it's to a level of a strength, right? That's threshold, right? And that threshold, when it's reached, it gathers sufficient strength that allows it to carry the signal along the entire length of the neuron to the end, right? If it doesn't reach that minimum threshold, that means it hasn't got the minimum strength to carry that impulse, so it won't fire at all. So we say it will carry all the information, or it will carry none of the information, right? And the only guiding principle is that the minimum threshold must be reached. And we've discussed the threshold the last time we spoke. So what happens when a neuron is stimulated? And I discussed this one with you last week, right? We said that sodium and potassium channels open, right? These are ions that carry positive charges, right? They will rush into the cell, right? And because they are carrying positive charges, they will reverse the potential in the neuron. Remember, a neuron that is resting is more negative inside it, right? When the channels for sodium and potassium open, they go in, they will reverse the polarity, get more positive. That is how it reaches its threshold to be able to create an potential. So what I'm going through when you're still on the stream, and as I said, I'll give you these slides. Right, I think after today I'll email them to the academic office. They'll load them. Download them for you. So they'll load the first 3 slides. I think first 4 slides or so. Then it will create an action potential carrying the impulse or the information to the end of the neuron. Then its job is done. Right. Once the neuron carries the signal towards the end, right, it's done, right? It has to cross a space called the synapse to the next to the next neuron. Now, and remember, all this is just repetition, right? I already talked about the threshold of excitation, which is the minimum point where, the minimum point where a stimulation must get to for an impulse to occur. This is also the all or none principle that I have just explained at length. A neuron will fire or does not fire. When it does fire, it will always produce an impulse of the same strength, which means that the strength does not diminish as it's going along the axis. Let me explain that using an analogy that I use often, and I think I used the last time we spoke. So, an impulse. So you're going to pick a trotro from Accra to Medina, right? From Accra to airport is 10 cities. From Accra to Medina is 10 cities. You have 8 cities. So you say, well, I'll join the trotro and then drop me at 37 because I don't have money to get me through to Medina. And I meant to tell you that no. We are going to Medina, right? So if you don't have money, then don't board the trotro, right? Simple as that. So if you don't have 10 cities to board the trotro, right? You have 8 cities, then 8 cities is not sufficient strength, right? It is only 10 cities that's sufficient strength. It doesn't matter where you're going. 10 cities is what we need before you can go. It's just a simple analogy. Now, something that is important to understand is especially in the area of impulses that do not carry sufficient strength, right? Which means that an impulse can arrive, but it's not carrying sufficient strength. We call that greater potentials, or we can also call that sub-threshold potentials, less than threshold, sub-threshold, below the threshold, right? So ordinarily, if an impulse arrives at the neuron, received at the dendrites, right, and is sub-threshold, it's going to fade because it doesn't reach the minimum threshold of excitation. Nothing will happen to it. It will fade, right? Sometimes, however, a neuron receives signals that are sub-threshold, but two things can occur. They come at the same time. Multiple sub-thresholds come at the same time, right? Or they come closely together so that they are coming, one is coming before the another, but they are coming before the earlier ones fade. In both situations, they can be summed up because they are arriving before the sub-threshold potentials are fading. I'll explain that carefully, okay? So don't worry if you don't understand. So I said, when a neuron receives sub-threshold excitations or stimulations, ordinarily they will fade because they don't reach the minimum threshold needed for an action potential to occur. Two types of sub-thresholds arrive. One type is that they will come together. Several neurons send sub-threshold stimulations to a neuron. They arrive at the same time, right? And because they are all sub-threshold, each one is not significant. But when they arrive together, they can be summed up, right, to reach the minimum threshold or exceed the threshold, and then an action potential can occur in that receiving neuron. The other type is the case where sub-threshold don't arrive at the same time. So one neuron sends sub-threshold stimulations, but they are sent close in time, right? And then when they arrive, because they arrive before they fade away, they are also summed up. So in both cases, we have summing, right? We call the first type spatial summation, right? Spatial summation is a type where multiple neurons send sub-threshold stimulations to one neuron, right? Spatial because from different spaces, different areas. The other is called temporal summation. Temporal is the type where one neuron sends signals, and it's about the same stimulation. Not one is sending signal about this and is sending signal about that. And no, sending the same signal, right? So when one neuron sends repeated sub-threshold stimulations, it is called temporal summation. When different neurons send sub-threshold stimulations and they are summed up, it is called spatial summation, right? So this is very important to understand, right? So we know the all or none principle. We know why it's important to have an all or none principle. And then we just got to know about greater potentials. We just got to know about how they can be summed up. We talk about two types, spatial summation, and we also talked about temporal summation. And as I said, these things sound difficult, but they're not difficult at all, which is why I'm taking my time to explain them. And then when you have the slides, you can go over the slides yourself, and then also try and read a textbook from the library or any source you can get, right? So let's use this graph to explain the different things we're talking about, right? So I want you to write down the following things, right? I'm going to speak from the top of my head, but these are important things that if you know, then you are doing good. Write about afferent neuron and then write afferent neuron. This is just a sensory neuron and a motor neuron, right? Write down dendrites. Dendrite is a part of the neuron that receives signals from other neurons, right? And then write axons. Axons are the part of the neuron that sends signals towards another neuron, right? Now around the neuron is a covering called the membrane, right? The membrane, remember, has gates or channels, right? Those gates or channels are controlled specifically for particular ions. Remember what we talk about when I talk about selective permeability, right? That it opens and closes for selected ions. That's very important, right? Understanding that helps you and understand how the neuron, and if you, of course, before that, write down the sodium potassium pump, which pumps out positive ions out of the neuron, thereby creating a negative potential inside the neuron, which is the basis for the resting potential. Right? Now, when a stimulation arrives, it opens sodium channels and potassium channels. They go in carrying their positive charges, right? And then they reverse the polarity, creating an action potential, right? We've talked about the threshold, we've talked about the subthreshold, we've talked about gradient potentials, we've talked about spatial summation, we've talked about temporal summation, right? So I think I showed you this graph last week, right? I showed you this graph last week. So we're going to use this as some sort of revision, right? So resting potential is the line at -70, right? 2 is excitatory postnatal potential, right? It's a gradient potential. Now all the arrows we have to the right side of the number 2 are all examples of subpotentials.
Stop that procrastinating lifestyle and off the what is your problem right now?
Can someone tell those people to keep quiet? Who's the one talking? Whose mic is open?
Talking person. Out from the
Whose mic is open?
This shouldn't be continued like this. Please take her out. She's disturbing us. Please.
All right. So I said the arrows next to number 2 are all examples of sub-threshold potentials, right? Now we know the line of the minimum threshold, right? So once stimulation exceeds that part, we will expect that an action potential will occur, right? So the things we and then we're going to, so the next bit is quite very interesting, right? The next bit we'll talk about is called the inhibitory post-synaptic potential. So remember that subthresholds are the type that increase the likelihood of an action potential occurring, right? So anytime there is stimulation, an action potential is likely to occur, right? However, soon after an action potential, the neuron goes into a state called inhibitory potential, right? Which means that the neuron is prevented from sending an impulse. For now, just think about it that way, that after an action potential has occurred, there is a decreased likelihood that another action potential will occur right again, unless a few amount of time passes. And we'll explain that on the next few slides. But let's remember a few things as you change over. Resting potential, membrane, channels, ions, action potential, spatial summation, temporal summation. We talk about gradient potential. Now we're talking about the inhibitory post-synaptic potential. Right. Now, the period, let me just pause for a few seconds here. Anybody has a question? I know Hafiz, whose hand was up constantly. So Hafiz, what's your question? Hafiz, what's your question? Okay, Hafiz changed her mind or his mind. So we'll talk about the refractory period. Let me just go back to slide that I said that I see that soon after the threshold action potential where my cursor is, right, the line now drops below the resting potential. Right, yeah, there are two slight bumps or dips, not a bump, a dip. Which means that, remember, the resting potential is already more negative, right? And so when the line drops further down, it's even more negative than before it was, right? That period is called the refractory period, right? The refractory period is a period during which a neuron cannot send another action potential. The refractory period is the period during which a neuron cannot send an action potential, which means that the neuron is not even at the resting potential, it's more negative, and we call that hyperpolarized membrane or hyperpolarized potential. I'm putting it in the chat box. Hyperpolarized, right, potential. Right, I just put it in the chat box. Hyperpolarized potential. The neuron, when it's in the state of hyperpolarization, cannot send an action potential. And this period occurs typically right after an action potential. Now, this period is divided into two parts, right? The entire refractory period is around 400 milliseconds, around half a second, right? The first part, about 200 milliseconds, is called the absolute refractory period. The first part of it, about 200 milliseconds, is called absolute refractory period. And during this period, the first 200 milliseconds, a neuron cannot send an action potential no matter how strong the impulse is, no matter how strong the stimulation is. What it means is that a neuron cannot be stimulated for it to respond within half a second. It will send the first one, but not send the second one. That's very important, right? So a neuron gets stimulated, it sends an action potential, and then 200 milliseconds after that, it will not send another impulse, no matter how strong it is, right? And then the next 200 milliseconds is called the relative refractory period. In the relative period, normally it will not send, but if it receives a very strong impulse, a very strong stimulation, it is likely to send. Right? So let me repeat the explanation. Absolute period is the first 200 milliseconds. And during that period, an impulse, no matter how strong, or a stimulation, no matter how strong, cannot be sent. Right? The second half, 200 milliseconds. The next 200 milliseconds, so 300 to 400, normally it will not send. But if it receives a very strong stimulation, it's likely to send an impulse. So we talk about absolute refractory period, and then we also talk about the relative refractory period. And simply, this I mean, how it occurs is not crucial, but it's important to understand that it simply has to do with after an action potential occurs, right? A neuron deliberately pumps out both sodium and potassium rapidly because they are carrying out of the cell positive charges. Very, very quickly, inside becomes negative, right? That is what creates the resting. That's what creates the hyperpolarization, and the same mechanism also creates the resting potential. We discussed that in the beginning of the class, right? Any questions? Any questions?
76.
Hello, sir. Please, this is Hafiz.
Yes, Hafiz, go ahead.
Yes. So first, I want to find out: is there any laboratory that we can go and have an experiment like physical,
No,
explanation about this?
No, this is just theory.
No.
This is just theory. But Hafiz, how do you expect to see? These are microorganisms. How do you expect to see? We don't have. This is, remember, our course is not biology course. It's biological psychology. So we are trying to understand these mechanisms so that we can understand behavior.
Wow.
Right?
And two.
So you see that these things are important for other things we'll study later on, not for themselves.
Wow. Okay. So, and the other one, I wrote something about the hillocks, the axon hillocks.
Yeah.
That is the first place where action potentials take place.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got it right.
Yeah, you're right. So
Okay, sir.
the dendrite receives the signal, brings it, sends them to the cell body, right? It's a cell body. Is that point where, remember, there's a cell body point where cell body where an impulse decision to send or not send will come from, right? And if it's going to be resent, it is regenerated from the axon hillock. It's just a point on the cell body.
Then it moves from there to the myelin
Along
sheath.
the axon. Yeah, to the end. Yeah, to the end. Yes.
To the myelin sheath.
The myelin sheath is a cover along the axon.
Yes. Okay, so thank you, sir.
Well,
Good evening, sir.
somebody. Lisa, go ahead. Lisa
Yes,
Emmanuel, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, please, if you don't mind, if you can go over the absolute refractory, the difference between the absolute refractory and the relative one for me, I'll be very happy.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do
Yes,
that. Yes, Gloria. I'll do that. Gloria.
Sir, good evening. Sir, please, I'm also trying to understand resting potential, but still, I'm not so clear with that. So please,
Okay.
if you can.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Ella K.
Hello, sir. Please, thank you very much. My question is about myelination. I understand it plays a very vital role in human intelligence. I want to know at what point in time or in human's life does that happen?
Okay, so I haven't said that myelin plays an important role in intelligence. I didn't say that at all. What I said was
I'm not saying that is what you said, but what I read in the textbook recommended.
Well, I haven't come across that. Myelin is a fatty substance that covers neurons, and its role is to create insulation. Insulation because the neurons carry they become electrified. So if a neuron has electrical currents running through it, right, and hasn't got a covering, then when it touches another neuron, it will short circuit. You know what that means? Some of its currents will move to the other side, so that one neuron is active, but another neuron line next to it is also becoming active when it shouldn't be active. Right? That's why its purpose is very important, to prevent a neuron from short circuiting. Right? That's one. But the other thing is that when it's not there, what happens is that rather than myelin, which occurs when there are disorders, it occurs when there are disorders, a disorder called, I think I said it last week, multiple sclerosis. Right? I've just put it in the chat box. Touch motor neurons that control muscles. They touch, right? And sometimes can impede movement, can impede motor activity. It can also sometimes cause paralysis, right? With neurons that have no myelin around them, they are slower because myelin speeds up neural transfer, right? So a neuron without myelin is slower. A neuron and which the muscles that they serve tend to be paralyzed as well, right? So myelin serves a very important function, but I haven't read that it has anything to do with intelligence. So let me explain the two other things people are asking for. Resting potential is the state of the neuron where we say the membrane has become polarized, right? That process occurs because the membrane keeps out positively charged ions like potassium and sodium, right? So inside is more negative. That's resting potential. And that's a state a neuron must be before it can send an action potential, before it can send an impulse. Then let me go on to the refractory period. Refractory period is a period that follows an action potential. And you're saying that it lasts roughly around 400 milliseconds. And typically, within that 400 milliseconds, an impulse will not occur. The neuron is getting ready to be at rest where it can initiate another action potential, right? That 400 milliseconds is divided into two parts. Absolute period is the first 200 milliseconds. And during that time, a neuron can never send an impulse. The other 200 milliseconds following the first two is the relative. You're saying typically it will not send an impulse. But if the impulse is very strong, it is likely to respond. Yes, Jocelyn.
Okay, doctor, please, my question is, I want to understand the resting potential rule by giving a practical example. I want to know if I get the concept correct. So, example, if one is sleeping or one is in a very quiet area and the brain is not really it's not in use, it's just like resting. Is this what you can refer to as the resting potential?
No, the resting potential is simply a neuron which is not active. That's all. So if you have neurons in your fingers that go all the way to your brain, right? So if the neurons in your index finger, nothing is stimulating your index finger, the neurons are at resting. Unless, for example, somebody touches your finger, then the neuron becomes active. But before someone touches your finger, the neuron is at rest. Right? So neurons that are not active are resting. They are in the resting potential state. Mavis.
Sir, so in that case, is whether you are sleeping or not.
Is Mavis a male?
Hello, Prof.
Yes, Mavis, go ahead.
Please, it looks like the chat box is disabled.
It's not disabled. Can anybody see the chat box?
No, please. Is it?
No, it's disabled.
It depends on the phone and it depends on the device you are using.
No. It's not showing at all.
It does not depend on the phone or device. It is disabled.
No, please. It's disabled.
Some people are seeing it, some people are typing, is what I'm saying.
If some people are seeing it, then it's not disabled.
Boss, it's disabled. A majority of us cannot access the chat room.
So
if your gadget is helping
you are just join as an if you join through logging in, it will not be
disabled.
Yeah, so go back and join and log in into Teams very well and it will be open. If you join as an attendee, it will not be open.
Okay, so from where I see it's not
device disabled.
Okay, maybe go with your question.
They have several ways of logging to the lecture room.
It's not
If you are joining as an attendee or a guest, it will not come.
Allow
maybe
the lecture.
Go out with your question.
The chat box is disabled. That's my problem. It's not working. So I don't know what.
Okay, maybe there's nothing I can do about that because from where I sit, it's not disabled. And if other people are seeing it, then it means that it's not disabled.
Sir, no one is seeing it apart from that guy. That very guy. He's the only one.
Nobody is seeing it apart from.
Yes, all of us can see the chat room. All of us can see
it because of how we joined.
Please, can you keep quiet for the lecturer to give us the process in which we can see?
Okay, Eva Akwe. Eva Akwe, your hand is up. Mustafa I can see that Mustafa.
Sir, go ahead. I don't know. The thing is, okay, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I don't know. Like my other colleagues were saying, it's only the Psych 223 that we can't access the chat always. We normally use laptops to join, but always we can't access the chat box. That's our problem, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Daniel Coach. Daniel.
Yeah, good evening, Doc.
Good evening.
I don't know whether this issue has actually been addressed already, but I am actually with the opinion that if like the lecture can actually be recorded, because this thing looks a little bit complex, and then the rate at which the tuition is actually going, we are trying to make. I'm personally trying to make some notes, but then it's a little bit difficult for me. So if it can actually be recorded, I'll be very grateful.
Daniel, it won't be recorded, okay? You're going to have the slides. And I've been teaching this course for about 20 years, right? And so I know what challenges students and what doesn't challenge students. Recording it wouldn't make it any easier for you. You remember there is distance, there is main campus, there is city campus. They don't record. You also see it on slides like you are seeing it on slides, right? You don't see a recording of it to make it any easier. So that's your problem, Daniel. Francis Dogbe. Go ahead.
So please, my question right now is, for we the distance students, like in the situation now where we can't have the access to the slides, I want to ask,
you will have access to the slides
as the regular students that
they don't have access to the slides either. You are going to have access to the slides. They don't have access to the slides. They come to classroom and write notes, right? I said I'm going to give you the slides. I've said it like 3 times already. I'll give you the slides. So what's your problem? Francis, what's your problem? What's your real problem? When I teach at City Campus or main campus, I don't give them slides. I just go to the classroom and show and project it. When I finish, I take my laptop away. I have told you have the slides. With Apache.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Sir, please. My problem is almost like what my brother just said. Because our network sometimes worries us, saying we don't get whatever you teach 100%. It's on and off. Moreover, we are not able to do our little notes when we are about to do it, and we have not gotten the slides yet. So when it happens, we are not able to revise what we have been. Again, you are teaching. For instance, I get confused and I don't know. I don't really understand what you are.
Don't create problems that are not existent. Okay. Don't create problems that are not there and say, oh, this is a problem, Mama. This is my problem. No, that won't help you. Okay. There is always going to be one thing or another that's a problem for somebody every time. As I'm speaking right now, I'm speaking, my fan is off. My fan is not working. The room is hot. That doesn't mean that, therefore, I should teach differently. You manage the move along. Every day there's a new problem. Tomorrow, the economy. Another time there'll be water. Another time there'll be power cut. Right? Always there's something. Right? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do our best. Just do your best. Okay? Anybody has questions about the course that I can address, apart from slides question and video recording question and chat box question? Anybody has a question about the course?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Hafiz, go ahead.
The last time you something to go and read on our own, and I came across some tough words that I can't pronounce.
No, that's normal. What word was that? What word was that? Pardon me?
There is a China name, Swine. Swine is there, and Pantaglossiasis.
Schwann cells.
Yes, Schwann cells and pH. Glossiasis every year. Close with you. Let me.
So Hafiz, what's your real? I don't understand. I'm not getting your problem.
Please, can we mute ourselves and listen to the lecturer?
Trying to get people to tell me if you have challenges about the course, I address them and we move on. So you have somebody was asking about resting potential, I address that. Refractory period, I address that. Anybody has questions? Yes, Prince or Samuel. This is the last question.
Good evening. Please, I want to ask. Last 2 weeks, the class was supposed to be in two sections, Monday and Tuesday. But the Monday one happened, but the Tuesday one didn't happen. So I'm trying to ask if there will be some makeup class for those who weren't able to join on Monday.
I don't understand. Say the last part again.
So I'm trying to ask if there will be a makeup class for those who weren't able to join on Monday, because the Tuesday one didn't happen.
If you come Monday, you shouldn't come Tuesday. So I'm addressing people here as Monday group, not Monday and Tuesday group. If I have an announcement for Tuesday, I'll put in a place where Tuesday people will see it.
Okay, thank you.
You're coming Monday and coming Tuesday, you're wasting your 2 hours. Okay.
Okay, sorry,
Okay, thank you.
my network went off.
Prince, I'm saying that we have two groups, not one group 2 days. We have two groups, Monday group, Tuesday group. So if you come Monday, don't come Tuesday. So if I have an announcement for Tuesday, I'll tell the Tuesday group.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
And I'm thinking they're not here.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, okay. So, yes.
The word is PHAGOCYTOSIS.
I can't wrap my head around this. FPHA.
Yeah. GO.
Yeah. I'm listening. PHAGO. CY.
Yeah. TOSIS.
I don't know what that word is, so I'm not really sure.
It says it is part of the brain's nervous system. It serves as.
Are you sure you're spelling the right thing?
PHAGO.
Alright, so let's now talk about the synaptic transmission. Okay, now,
Dennis, please mute your mic.
Let's talk about synaptic transmission. Now we've talked. So what we discussed was axonal transmission, right? Transmitting information along the axon from the axon helix cell body of the cell body to the end of the axon. The reason why this is important is that the synapse neurons have microscopic gaps between them called the synapse, right? So for an impulse to travel across, it will require something special, not because it doesn't allow, its electrical energy cannot go through space anymore, right? So the next few slides we'll talk about what happens inside the synapse, right? You remember that the signal that has come to the end of the axon came via electrical processes. So it came through some substance, but the space between two neurons is a gap called synapse, right? And the process is chemical in nature, right? There's a process that allows signals to transmitted from one neuron to the next. It's chemical, right? Now, the presynaptic neuron is a neuron that is sending an impulse. The postsynaptic neuron is a neuron that is receiving an impulse. So, synapse is a space. Post, after, right? The one that's about to receive. And then before, is the one that's now bringing the impulse. Now, inside the end of the axons are chemicals called neurotransmitters, right? So look at the diagram on the right side, right? And at the top, to the right, you see the dendrites. Remember, you always look at branches, right? This is the axon. At the end of the axon, inside the buttons or the tip of the axon are neurotransmitters, right? These are chemicals. So chemicals that are found in the nervous system are called neurotransmitters. It's as simple as that, right? And as I said, I will give you have these slides, right? So you don't have to copy everything on that slide, but just try and understand the process that I'm talking about, right? So let's talk about neurotransmitters for a short while. There are two types of neurotransmitters, right? The first type is excitatory, right? Think about excite, right? So anytime excitatory neurotransmitter is released, right, the purpose is to cause excitement, to excite. It's supposed to create activity in a neuron, right? So if an impulse arrives at the end of the axon, it will cause the release of neurotransmitter. If it releases excitatory neurotransmitter, then it is going to cause the excitement, activation of the postsynaptic neuron, right? So excitatory neurotransmitters create excitatory postsynaptic potential, EPSP, right? So let's just think about the words carefully. An impulse arrives at the end of the axon. It causes excitatory neurotransmitter to be released, right? That neurotransmitter is a type that causes activation. It will cause activation in the postsynaptic neuron. And we call that, and in the process, we know we'll talk about depolarization, right? That is EPSP, excitatory postsynaptic potential, because it is leading to depolarization of the postsynapse, right? So anytime the neuron releases excitatory postsynaptic potential, excitatory neurotransmitter, it's going to cause an excitement. The opposite is inhibitory. Now, for now, we'll minimize explanation on this one, right? But sometimes a neuron causes the release of inhibitory neurotransmitter, right? It creates the opposite of excitatory. It prevents the postsynapse from being active, right? So let me give you an example. Many times, a neuron a signal arrives. For it to carry the signal forward, it will cause the release of excitatory neurotransmitter, which will depolarize the postsynaptic neuron. The impulse, then it creates an action potential in the postsynaptic neuron. The impulse is carried away, right? But what if that sensation, what if that neuron is carrying this information about pain, right? If you take a pain medication will go and cause a release of inhibitory neurotransmitter. Its effect is to block the pain transmission. Remember I said a few minutes ago that we are not learning these things for the sake of themselves. We are learning these things so that they help us understand behavior, right? So when somebody takes a painkiller, the painkiller goes into their body. It goes to cause the release of inhibitory neurotransmitter, and then it blocks, it hyperpolarizes the postsynaptic potential, so that the impulse, the pain impulse, cannot be carried across the synapse, right? So, you know you're feeling some pain, you took medication, you stop feeling the pain, because inhibitory neurotransmitter has been released and causing the blocking the flow of the pain, right? So this is something to know for now, right? But typically, a neuron releases excitation neurotransmitter is supposed to create an action potential or depolarize the action potential in the postsynaptic neuron, right? Now, this is your second assignment, right? There are different types of neurotransmitters. As I said, some are excitatory, some are inhibitory. These are the major classes: amino acids, acetylcholine, monoamines, purines, and gases. What I want you to do for your assignment, I'm not going to mark them, but I want you to do for yourself, right? Go and look for each one of the classes I mentioned. Look at the examples. So amino acids, I've provided 3 examples: glutamate, GABA, and glycine. I want you to go and look for examples of acetylcholine yourself. For monoamines, the examples are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. For each of the examples you will find, identify 2 things: whether they are inhibitory or whether they are excitatory. That's your assignment. Look for more examples of neurotransmitters. Identify whether they are excitatory or they are inhibitory in nature. I've just explained to you what they do, whether it's excitatory or whether it's inhibitory. So let me give you an example that will make it clearer. If you take sleeping medication, right, you start feel drowsy because sleep medications will go and cause the release of inhibitory neurotransmitter, the type that makes you feel drowsy, right? The type that makes you feel drowsy because the nervous system becomes inactive, right? Any questions? Gloria, any questions? Your hand has been up.
Yeah, sir. My question is, I want to understand where you were saying that when you take medicine, maybe you have a pain and you take medication, it's going to inhibit. I'm not clear. Is it that it's not sending the pain to the brain, or I'm not clear there, please?
If you have a neuron, this is carrying the pain sensation, right? And they carry the pain sensation from one neuron. This is the one neuron, this is a pre-synapse, and this is the post-synapse. So it's coming to connect to this one, and this one carries the pain to the brain. The brain says this is pain, right? But if you take pain medication, and the pain medication comes and stays in between the post-synapse and the pre-synapse, this one has no way of receiving that pain sensation anymore. So the pain stops. The pain is stuck in the presynaptic neuron. The brain does not receive the pain sensation, therefore you don't know there's pain. Any questions?
Okay, so please, does that mean that when the painkiller and then it blocks for it to have an inhibit or what? This problem. Does that mean that if you have, let's say, a fracture in your knee, maybe you had an accident, does that mean that it is not going to cure whatever fracture you have over there, or it's just going to block the pain, just like that?
Absolutely. Exactly. Any other question?
Please, yeah. With regard to the inhibitory, and you said it impedes flow of pain, across the body. And I want to know that does it actually further cause any kind of deterioration or side effects to the body?
Any drug you take has side effects. All drugs take has side effects. Pardon me?
Please, including herbal.
I already know about herbal.
Okay, right.
All right, any other question? Okay, so this slide is simply talking about the different neurotransmitters and their actions, right? But you read it on your own. Aaron Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, I read something on what you told us in the book you told us, right? And with the serotonin, they said mostly it's an inhibitory neurotransmitters, which reduces anxiety and depression. So I want to say, it's mostly inhibitory. So I don't know whether in some parts it's an excitatory.
So some neurons, fine, that's a good thing. Some particular neurotransmitters act differently, right? Some particular neurons, so there are some neurons that act both ways. And another example is dopamine. Dopamine acts both ways. So for example, we call dopamine complex neurotransmitter. So yeah, so they're right. Sometimes a neuron acts like inhibitory, other times it acts like excitatory, depending on its role it's playing.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. But there are other neurotransmitters that are purely just inhibitory or they're purely excitatory. I give an example. Acetylcholine is purely excitatory. GABA is purely inhibitory. Pardon me?
Yes, GABA inhibitory and glutamate excitatory.
Yeah, exactly. So you are reading, that's fine. Muniru Abukari. Okay, Muniru is already. Esther Ganyenya. Okay. All right, so let's move on.
You said every drug. Dog, please, Esther.
Yes, Esther, can you hear? Yes.
Yes, please. Dog, please, you said every drug have side effects. Please, guys, food supplement drugs also have side effects.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, sir.
But if you take chemicals, your body will have to get rid of the chemicals. I don't know. Maybe I should take that back because I'm not an expert in that area. Okay. So the assignment I gave you is the same as I have here, right? Identify 10 common neurotransmitters. Identify each as either excitatory or inhibitory, and then describe their unique functions in each nervous system. You don't have to bring it. Just write it out. Keep it. It's useful, right, for your own help. So back to synaptic transmission. Been stuck. Strange. Okay, Anita Edouard, go ahead with your question whilst I sort this one out.
Try one day, just one day.
Benza, go ahead.
Try one day, nigga. Go. Okay, try it. Then, I'm doing there. Then the biscuits. I need them.
Anita, is Anita there?
Doc, please, my question is, can food actually play an impact on the neuron transmitters?
Well, good question. The thing is that maybe the question to ask is, how do we get neurotransmitters? They come from the food we eat, right? So the food we provide helps us produce neurotransmitters. If you take alcohol, for example, it can influence the release of GABA, right? So yes, some things we take, even when you exercise, it causes the release of some particular neurotransmitters, right? So yes, the things we do can influence neurotransmitter production, right? What that Jocelyn? Just a second, my thing is not showing. Anita, is your hand is still up? You have a question? Fine. Okay, so we're back to, you can see the slides, right? It's small, but you can.
No, sir.
Yeah, pardon me? You can see. Okay, all right, fine. So let's get through quickly. So the arrival of an impulse, as I said, at the terminal, will trigger the release of neurotransmitter. And let's stick to the idea that it causes the release of excitation neurotransmitter. That's the idea for now. Now, once it arrives, the chemicals or the neurotransmitters, right, are stimulated to cross and bind with channels on the postsynaptic terminal, the dendrites, right? So arrival of an impulse in the presynapse causes the release of excitation neurotransmitters. They cross, and then they go and occupy spaces called receptors. I'm using a chat box for those who see it, right? Receptors. Receptors are just like spaces. So the chemicals go and stay and occupy them, and then it creates a binding action. A binding action is simply a chemical process. That chemical process causes depolarization, right? So the arrival of an impulse causes a release of neurotransmitters to occupy receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. And I'm using the terms carefully. That's why I explained in the beginning. Presynapse is a neuron that is sending, right? So the impulse arrives, or the information arrives at the end of the presynaptic neuron. It causes a release of neurotransmitters. it will cause a release of excitatory neurotransmitters. They occupy receptors. Receptors are spaces on the postsynaptic dendrites. And then it causes depolarization. Threshold is reached, and then an action potential is regenerated in the postsynaptic neuron. I know what I'm saying is a lot of words I'm using, but it's a very simple, and as I said, it happens within 1 second, right? In the presynaptic neuron, it's a chemical process that occurs. In the postsynaptic neuron, to cross from one neuron to another is a chemical process that occurs. So axonal transmission is electrical in nature. Synaptic transmission is chemical in nature. Right? So always think about the fact that neurotransmitters, not all the time, but for the purpose of this discussion, think about the fact that the neurotransmitters, when they are released, the purpose is to depolarize the postsynaptic neuron. That's the main idea, to depolarize the postsynaptic neuron. That depolarization creates an action potential, right, for the impulse to be carried to the next neuron. Activation of the receptors occurs, and so on and so forth. So what is a summary of the chemical events that occur? Right? Now, let me ask, sometimes I know you may not have the answer, but you may be able to think your way through it and have an answer. So what do you think happens if depolarization occurs, but there is no way, nothing stops the depolarization from occurring? What do you think will happen to the postsynaptic neuron? What do you think will happen? A neuron gets depolarized at the postsynaptic membrane or dendrite, but nothing stops it from becoming, it's still repeatedly inspiring. What would you think will happen?
It will crash.
Well, I don't know about crashing, but something bad will happen, right? A neuron that does not rest will die. A neuron cannot repeatedly become active. Is the reason why right after an impulse occurs, after an action potential happens in the postsynaptic as well, right? So there are processes that are put in place to regulate the flow of impulses. One of them is called the reuptake, right? Reuptake simply means that after it's done its job, it is absorbed back into the presynaptic neuron, right? It's released, and then after it has depolarized the postsynaptic membrane, it is reabsorbed. It can also be made inactive. So there is reuptake, then there is inactivation. Inactivation, where inactive compound. So reuptake is a process where the presynaptic neuron, most of the neurotransmitter molecules intact for reuse at a later date. Examples of neuron that is disposed of by that process is serotonin, which is taken back into the presynaptic neuron. Any question? Any question? Okay. So we have my next few slides. I've already discussed them in the beginning: temporal summation and spatial summation. Right? right? So I'm going to skip through them. You're going to have this slides anyway. I'm going to skip through them and see if I have any new thing to, yeah. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, so that's the end of that. Now I don't want to start something new at this point, but next week we'll look at drugs and how drugs affect behavior. So look at drugs like cocaine, alcohol, caffeine. Yes, Isaac.
Yes. Good evening, Doc.
Good evening.
Okay. I'm sorry to take you back, but I am. Are there individual differences in threshold excitation among people?
No, but there are differences in the threshold of neurons.
Okay.
So neurons don't have the same threshold. Neurons are varying thresholds. So a neuron can have a threshold of, say, at minus 40. Another neuron in the same person will have minus, say, 20 millivolts.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Thank you. I'm very clear.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Yes, sir. In your earlier submission, you said something about the synapse trigger the release of neurotransmitters from the presynaptic neuron into the. I think I'm a little confused whether into the synapse or into the postsynaptic neurons. So I want to know.
So fine. So the space. So they are. So once they cross the synapse, they bind to the receptors on the postsynapse. They are released from the presynaptic into the synapse, but they will bind with the receptors on the postsynapse.
Okay, sir.
I hope that clarifies or answers the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So via Dog Beta.
Okay, sir. So I'm being asked to describe the chemical transmission that takes place in the neuron. For example, the electrical, you can have how to go about it. I'll start from a dendrite receives signals from the environment or organs, and then they are being integrated in this.
So what's your question? So I don't mean to answer your question. What do you want?
No, I want to know if I'm being asked on to narrate how to go about it.
So you narrate. So you just narrate it. You just narrate what the answer is. You just narrate. Muniru Abukari.
Prof, good evening, Prof.
Good evening.
Prof, can we say that these neurotransmitters, can we say that they are chemicals that are found in the neurons, like neuron transmitters?
Yes, they are chemicals found in neurons. They are produced in neurons, but they're in the nervous system. Yes, you can say that.
Right.
Brains.
Thank you, Doc.
Brains are waiting for you. Josephine Josephine. Samudin.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead,
Please.
Samudin.
Please. Temporal submission. I don't know whether lectured on it already or not.
Yes, I did. But you're going to have these slides anyway, so.
Okay, my network was bad, so I couldn't hear
what do you mean?
anything about that one.
Oh, you did. We did
was
talk
bad
about that. We did talk
initially,
about that.
so
Sorry, we talk about it.
Action then the tools. Yeah.
I didn't hear the question. Was that a question or a statement? Okay, look, you guys we have 3-4 minutes to talk about. If you have questions to ask, you can close at 8:30. Okay. So we will have an announcement. Okay, so I'm traveling tomorrow, but I will be in for Monday's class. So please don't call me to ask me, am I coming? If I'm not coming, I'll announce that I'm not coming. Okay. So next week, Monday, we'll have a class. Right? Enoch Azameti. Enoch.
Hello, sir.
Go ahead, Enoch.
This is not about what you lectured today, but I want to know why when I go to Sakai on my resource Psych 22233, I don't get the slides to download.
Because they're not there yet.
Okay,
they'll be there this week.
Okay. Thank you.
They'll be there this week. They'll be there this week. Okay. All right. Hafiz Gandam.
Yes, sir.
Hafiz, go ahead.
So, sir, in this case, should we inform our colleagues?
No, don't inform anybody.
In this case, should we inform our colleagues who are supposed to have?
Don't inform anybody. I'll do that myself.
So they join us from there.
I will inform them myself. You don't have to join
Last
anybody.
week, they were complaining that it happened.
Hafiz, I have two classes, Monday and Tuesday. I will do everybody what I have to teach. I will teach entirely. Nobody will be shortchanged.
I believe you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. All right. Have a good evening, guys. So see you next week, Monday, and then we'll be looking at drugs and behavior. So I'll